All right, so this is James. It looks like we're ready. And Patty, just confirm for me we are all set on YouTube and live streaming and everything.
Hold on just 1 second. I want to make sure that they posted the link.
All right, so this is James. It looks like we're ready. And Patty, just confirm for me we are all set on YouTube and live streaming and everything.
Hold on just
Okay.
1 second. I want to make sure that they posted the link.
All right, so this is James. It looks like we're ready. And Patty, just confirm for me we are all set on YouTube and live streaming and everything.
Hold on just 1 second. I want to make sure that they posted the link.
All right, so this is James. It looks like we're ready. And Patty, just confirm for me we are all set on YouTube and live streaming and everything.
Hold on just 1 second. I want to make sure that they posted the link. Okay.
Did everybody else hear that echo?
Yeah, that was me. Hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right.
All right. Let me
Oh, I thought
check.
that was me. I'm like trying to change
No.
things here. Okay.
It was me. Sorry. Hold on. Just let me make sure that the link has been posted.
It was like an infinite echo loop of what I had said.
Yeah. Okay, hold on just 1 second. Let me make sure.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, we're live. We're good to go.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Patty.
Sure.
All right, so it's just past 6 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order and we'll move right to our first item on the agenda, which is approval of the meeting minutes from our meeting on April 28th. Does anybody have any comments or revisions?
Yes, James.
Yes, hey, Ron, go ahead.
Yes, on page 2, it would be the paragraph directly below the one that says the motion was seconded, the vote was 6-4, did not pass. I believe the next one was the one that I proposed, and I think before Phil tried to help me out and went 5-5, mine was 1-9 and not 5-5.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
We had discussed that these were going to list the dissenters, and these didn't list the people who dissented. And that's just something that we had agreed to do going forward. And then the motion, my motion has the wrong language, the second to last one on the eliminating the council appointment of vacancy. It has the text that I'm proposing tonight and not the text that was proposed at the meeting. What was proposed at the meeting was just to have the election called within 120 days of the vacancy. And then I believe there is a motion missing after we voted to send the qualifications back to subcommittee A. There was a motion to have the city manager be immediately terminated if they violate the provisions under Article 3, Section 5. And that vote was 2-8.
All right. Anything else from anyone?
Rhian, I had asked you to send that to me, so I wrote exactly what you had sent.
I emailed you back on the 28th with the text of all three of the motions I made at the last meeting.
Okay,
All right,
I will review it again.
Yeah, that sounds like an easy fix. I just had one thing. I think it was a typo, but on the second page, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, seventh paragraph, I guess, down, it said the motion was made, comma, seconded. The vote was 6-4, and this did pass. It should say it did not pass because it didn't meet the 7-3 threshold. All right, anybody else have any corrections or comments that they'd like to make before we move to vote on this?
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
There's a part of it says a motion was made by me that the city manager education qualification should not include the type of degree this person should hold. That was not actually the motion that I made. I made a motion that there should be a minimum qualification of 5 years experience. So, I mean, I can send the official language over, but that was not my motion.
Okay. Yeah, send that to Kathy. Rhian, you were going to say something again?
Yeah, we didn't take a vote on Phil's motion that the city manager could only hold the position for 2 5-year terms. It had been discussed in the discussion under Sam's motion, but we never actually voted on it. There had been a motion to table that was also seconded, and then we didn't vote on that. We just voted straight on Sam's motion.
I will go back and listen to the tape, Ray, and we did
Okay.
vote on it.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? Ludi, Phil, Hillary, Tom, Julian, anything from you guys?
I seem to recall that we did vote on that motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So unless anybody else has anything to add, I will, with those revisions, I'll move to adopt the meeting minutes. Is there a second?
I'd like to wait, just due to the number of corrections, I'd like to wait to vote until we have a list of the corrected minutes.
Okay, fair enough. We'll table that till next meeting, and I'll make a note to put the approval of 428 minutes on the next agenda. And then Kathy, I guess if you wouldn't mind sending those out as well prior to the next meeting, that would be great. All right, so with that, let's move to item number 2, approval of charter amendments that we took a first vote on last meeting. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Rhian, and he can walk us through what he sent out to us.
Yeah, I'll share. I will hopefully be sharing. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so 136 and 132 go together. This is just that the city manager shall not serve as the permanent head of any department. It does wind up needing to be in Article 5 as well, so we just struck out that little bit in Article 5. RN or do you want to do these one at a time, or do you want me to go through them all and then we'll vote on them all, James?
Let's go through them all and vote on them all at once.
Okay. So then this is RN 138 is the bonding. And this was word for word what Sam had given us, except I added the clause of the premium of which shall be paid by the city. Just that seems to be standard in all of the other ones that I was looking at. I'm not sure if, Sam, if you accidentally left that off when you read it, but most of them do clarify that the premium is paid by the city. And then the final one, RN 115, is just changing the consecutive occasions to consecutive regular meetings.
Okay, excellent. So can I have a motion and a second, and then I'll ask if anyone has discussion, and then we'll move to a final vote.
I motion to approve the amendments as stated by Rian.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. All right. And Kathy. Kathy, anything from you on discussion?
No discussion.
Okay. Julian, anything from you on discussion?
No.
All right. Tom, any discussion?
No, sir.
Ron, any discussion?
No.
All right. Myself, no. Hillary, any discussion?
No, thank you.
Rianne, any discussion?
No, I'm good.
Sam, any discussion?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Ludian.
Nope, I'm good.
Boy, we're a lively bunch tonight.
Anything from you, Ludi? I think you're still muted.
Oh,
if you tried
sorry.
to say
I'm all
anything.
good. I'm good. I'm good. No,
Okay,
no.
perfect. All right, perfect. And then Phil, anything from you?
No.
All right, perfect. So let's take a formal vote. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
all right, Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James is a yes, Hillary,
Yes.
Rianne,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, it sounds good. All right, so next item on our agenda is the subcommittee report, which Rianne emailed to us, and then Mike Roy has some comments. I guess first I'll ask if Ludi, as the chair of the subcommittee, do you have anything to add to what was sent out to us?
I do not have anything to add. No, everybody got the email, and I'm excited to hear what Mike has to say. But I
Okay.
think that they kind of speak for themselves.
All right, thank you. All right, so I understand we have.
I do have one quick thing to add, and that's that I got a call from Flavia today, and she wanted to weigh in that she thinks that what's best for the city is to essentially keep it as simplified as possible. Of the two ones that were presented to her, she liked the first one better. She doesn't think that we should be attempting to tie the hands of the council in any way, either now or going forward, in terms of letting them decide who the best candidate for city manager is.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that Mike Roy is on the line tonight. Or maybe not. I know I might be cutting in and out. But is Mike here tonight, Mike Roy?
I don't see him on the line, but he did intend to call in. So let me I'll text him on his phone and see if he's gonna be here shortly or what his situation is. Hold on.
Okay. All right. So then let's move on in the agenda, and then Patty, just feel free to interrupt if and when he gets on the line.
We'll
All right. So so I believe Mike wanted to comment on the first motion that's listed in Article 4, under Article 4 on the agenda. So let's skip to the second motion, which is Tom's motion. So I'll turn it over to Tom and let him articulate his motion.
Thanks, James. I think the motion is pretty straightforward.
Tom, we lost you.
And obviously, I think we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years that budget issues have been a hot button point for, for the community at large, and maybe probably the biggest issue for our community. And, at the same time, I think that there's something to be said for the idea that voting on the budget every year at large, it may not be something.
If you intended to chime into the Charter Commission meeting. So they're kind of waiting for you if you want to give your 2 cents. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, Patty?
Yep.
Was Patty talking to me?
No, I think she just forgot to mute her phone. She was talking to Mike,
Okay,
but
all right.
go ahead, Tom.
I'm sorry about the delay there, guys. I thought Patty had something to say. I didn't want to cut her off. So, and I think at the same time, I don't necessarily know if there's enough support by and large from the crew on this commission to turn it over to a vote every single year. And I think that, a very fair compromise to that idea is to give the city council a certain amount of leeway. If they exceed that, then the city has a voice on it. The public has a voice on it beyond just who they elected 3 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever it may have been. And to that end, I think that if the city's budget stays within a 3% increase in spending in a given year, that's completely within the autonomy of the city council. If they exceed that, then it would go out to a citywide vote. That's the motion. And if there's a second for it, I guess we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, thanks, Julian.
Yeah.
All right, so discussion. And if you didn't notice, I'm going in reverse alphabetical order like I have been doing. So Kathy, discussion?
Well, I do agree with Tom that tax-paying residents have just had it with year after year of increases. I almost would like to see that. I mean, I agree with everything Tom said, but I personally would like to see the residents vote on this every year. So after, when the time is right, I do want to make a different motion to this, but Tom is absolutely right. The tax-paying residents have had it. So I guess that's all I want to say about that at the moment.
All right, thank you. Julian?
So, yeah, just a point of clarification. We're saying that the council votes on the budget, but it only goes to the voters if it's over 3% increase. Is that what we're asking for? Can you explain the motion a bit more, Tom? Because your phone cut out through half of your presentation. Tom? I think we're having audio issues with Tom.
Tom's muted.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
muted, so he might.
So maybe anyone can explain that roughly. I read
So-
this. Yeah.
Yeah, so Julian, the way I understand the motion is that if the city council votes for a budget that is more than 3% than it was the prior year,
The voters.
then then it would get sent to voters. But yeah, we can hear you now, Tom. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, that's exactly what I was saying, James. You summed it up well.
Okay, so it wouldn't really take the power away from the council because providing it was under 3%, they could do what they like. I'm not really sure what we have to be scared of. It's taxpayer dollars that is at stake, and I think the taxpayers should vote on their own dollars. It would solve budget repeals. You know, there wouldn't be a need for a budget repeal if there is that kind of breaks in place. And so I think that would be helpful. It would have some safeguards. Businesses would know and understand when investing that they have some kind of safeguard, that they won't face a mill rate of maybe 10 mil increase. And same with potential homeowners looking to buy. They would have some kind of guidance about the maximum increase they could expect. And what a lot of, you know, I was looking at a home here, it was $280,000. The property tax was $7,000. So a big hike on that is just going to force a lot of people out. And, you know, to have 7 people involved, many who don't even have opponents or are elected just on a D name, I think that having the voters involved would be a much fairer system throughout. And like I said, would avoid budget repeals and putting that power in the hands of 7 people. Because in our community, many of the elderly don't get involved. They don't feel empowered and they don't go to council meetings. We've heard a lot about how women haven't really been involved and issues like that. But that, you know, there's also the elder disenfranchised population of the elder community that don't like to speak up or don't like to question so-called authority. And they're the most vulnerable in our community. So I think it would give some protection and breaks to them. So I am for your motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom, do you have anything more to add?
Just briefly, yeah. I mean, the idea behind this is not to strip the city council of its autonomy, because, you know, I mean, with the way math works, there are quite literally an infinite number of budgets that the city council could come up with that would be completely, entirely within their purview under this proposal. But it would also create a bit of a break and an incentive to manage spending year in and year out. And, you know, again, I don't necessarily know what the entire makeup of this is in terms of political affiliation. I believe it's that there are 6 or 7 Democrats. And one of the things that Democrats are supposed to be fixed income individuals, our seniors, and our low income folks. And budget increases affect them disproportionately. They just do, because it's a flat rate. And you know, if you're a renter and the mill rate goes up, that expense is going to get passed on to you. If you're a low income individual living on Social Security, living on VA benefits, or a combination of the two of those things, budget goes up, that you're paying for that. And there's no way around it. There's no tax deduction, there's no loophole, there's no tax credit for this. And I think that from what I've heard from the city, I think what we've heard from our constituents, this is it's a major concern, and I think it's a fair compromise to try and resolve it.
All right, thanks, Tom. Ron.
Yes, although I disagree with special elections, as we know they are costly, we did have a meeting back on January 8th that the law required us to have, being the Charter Commission. And the public there told us that this is one of the 7 things that they would like us to look into and try to correct. Not only that, I've been to many regular council meetings at the Stearns Building, and this is a common thing that is brought up, that they would like the citizens of Waterville to have some type of input and choice on the budget. For that reason, I would have to say that I would support this, but I'd like to ask Tom or you, James, a question that I'm quite kind of unclear on. if this is sent out to the public and they reject it, do we have another special election? How does this work?
No, he wants to stay out.
Tom, it's your motion. You can answer Ron's question.
Frankly, I don't know that I'm the municipal law expert here, but James and if anybody else wants to chime in, my understanding is that if it fails, it fails, and that's it. You know, if we make recommendations about how the charter is changed, and the citizens don't adopt them, then we're left with the charter that we met. You know, that we came
No,
into.
Tom, the question is if the voters reject the budget, what happens next?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was if they reject the amendment that we're making. That actually makes much more sense, Ron, that you would ask that question. I'm sorry.
Yes, maybe I didn't phrase it right, but basically that's what I mean, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do we have to keep having special elections? Yes.
Yeah, the vote would have to go back, the budget would have to go back to the city council and they would have to figure that out. They would then have to come up with another budget. And if they couldn't, I mean, I think the impetus on them at that point would be very, very high for them to find a budget that comes in or under that threshold.
But I do agree with you, Tom. I don't think I want to make the decision on whether we do this or not. I think we should put it on the ballot for the citizens to decide if this is the route that they want to go.
All right, thank you, Ron. I'm next in line, and I certainly understand the sentiment of this motion, but I'm not in favor of it. And one of the reasons is because I know that the city council, you know, one of their main jobs is to come up with and pass a budget. And I know they spend a lot of time doing that task, and they talk with all of the department heads, the city manager, mayors, all interested parties. And they do a heck of a lot more research and work on this issue than me as a relatively informed citizen that I just wouldn't have the time to explore. So I think at some point, you know, we talked about how the ward system, you know, tends to elect good candidates. And I think at some point we just have to sort of trust them to make the right decision. And if we think they don't, then maybe they don't get reelected the next time. And Julian pointed something out that there is another process for citizens to speak up and repeal the budget. And I think that sort of satisfies my concern. So I wouldn't be in favor of it. And Hillary.
Okay, James, you got cut off at the end, but I think you were done. So, Tom, I think I had a question. So you said the residents would get to vote on this. How would they vote on this?
We would have an election and it would just be thumbs up or thumbs down.
So it would be a special election for this. And so as Ron was saying, if they say no, you said there would be pressure on the city council then to come in with something under 3%. But what if they don't, then what?
We have an election.
Then we have another special election. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm not convinced the process is thought through all the way. I see it as being a little flawed. Thumbs up, thumbs down with the Charter Commission. As we've discussed before, there are lots of reasons for it. That makes sense. A thumbs up, thumbs down on a vote for the city budget doesn't indicate to city councilors what portion of the budget residents are concerned about. So you've got this, massive city budget that they're looking at, and a yay or nay doesn't help the city councilors to have any direction. But you said something, and Kathy hit on something. You said, you said when you said this is something residents are really, really frustrated by. What I heard Kathy saying is Kathy was saying tax-paying residents. I'm wondering if what we're talking about, and our subcommittee talked about this a little bit. So there aren't any towns comparable to the size of Waterville that allow their residents to do this. They basically look at it as this is representative government. This is part of what you elect a representative to do. There are a couple processes that you can consider if you're concerned about it. The most obvious is attending meetings, in this case, tuning into meetings, reaching out to your city councilors, having conversations, and letting them know what your concerns are. And then, as Julian pointed out, in the worst case scenario, you could have a referendum to sort of reject the budget. I think what I heard, though, Kathy talking about, and what I feel like I've heard a lot of people talking about, were property taxes. Now, Tom, you said if the budget goes up, everyone's hit by it. How are they hit by it? And what form are they hit by an increase in the budget specifically?
Well, I mean, I don't think I could have been much clearer about it. If you are a resident in this city and the mill rate goes up, you're going to be affected by it one way or another. You're a renter, your rent is going to go up. You're a property owner, your property tax is going to go up. You're a business owner, your property tax is going to go up.
Right.
That affects everyone.
Right. Okay. So I think what I feel like I hear a lot of people talking about are the property taxes. Okay. That the property taxes continue to go up, that there's sort of this way that municipalities, and specifically here in Waterville, sort of use this reliance, and it's an over reliance on property taxes to sort of make up shortfalls in budgets or shortfalls in revenue, right? And what happens with property taxes increasing so drastically is that it just reinforces these socioeconomic inequalities. And that's what Julian's hitting on. Absolutely. You've got elderly who are concerned about being priced out of their homes. Okay. But I'm not convinced the solution to the property tax issue is solved by letting residents just vote on the budget. I think that the solution to property taxes is shifting that burden of cities to sort of come up with this revenue and shifting it more to the state. I think the state needs to be more involved with creative solutions that could mean the state picking up more of the bill in terms of taking on a larger responsibility to take care of local school budgets. I think you might need the state to work with cities to be creative in different sources of revenue. But the reality is, as James touched on, if your city councilors keep raising property taxes, the easiest way you deal with it is you vote them out. So if the issue is property taxes, then the issue isn't solved by people voting on the budget. I think the process of voting on it, you've got either city councilors feeling like their hand is forced, and everybody just said they didn't want to force city councilors. And Tom, finally, I guess my last question would have been the 3%. So out of the last 10 years of city budgets, I'm wondering how we came up with that 3%. How many of the last 10 years is
Hillary, 3% is the standard rate of inflation every year that Social Security goes up by, typically.
Right.
Okay.
But we're looking at, we're in a pandemic right now, right?
Hillary,
We're in a Yep.
You gonna let me finish or not?
Sure.
You asked me a question, right? So
I'm sorry,
it's-
you're cutting out.
Hillary, are you gonna let me finish?
You're cutting out, Tom. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you.
Okay. Well, the reality is that that's indexed to, and those people tend to be some of our most vulnerable citizens. Now, at the same time, Hillary, I mean, your idea of, the state should step up more. I mean, look, ideally, the federal government would step up more. The state would step up more. The state has no obligation to do that. And at the same time, if the state is going to step up and do that, and this is something that I believe I heard, I believe it was, who was it? I cannot remember who it was. It was either a city councilor or it was the mayor that we had before Mr. Isgro. And the same argument was made, the state needs to step up. If the state steps up, Hillary, that money also comes from tax-paying residents. It doesn't really, it's not like, well, okay, the state of Maine has stepped up and done some revenue sharing, which, by the way, they have no obligation to do beyond what the statute says. So they don't have to give us any more than they're typically giving us. But even if they do, that money still comes from us. It still comes from the residents. It's not like, well, there's this windfall of money. And I'm surprised that there are more people in this world that don't need to be disabused of that notion.
Yeah, I don't think that it means, though, that they have to increase taxes to make up that shortfall. The state might have to shift their budgets and where they allocate funds. I think that would be my argument. But my question was, out of the last 10 years for the city of Waterville, do we know how many out of the last 10 years is proposed an increase greater than 3%?
Well, if history is correct on this, then I believe it's actually been 2 of the last 3 years. I believe 17, 18 was one, and I know for sure that 18, 19, 16, 17, and 17, 18. 17, 18 saw an 8.3% increase, Hillary.
Right. Oh, no, I know what's happened in the last couple of years. I'm talking about last 10 years.
Tom, James?
Yeah, go ahead, Julian.
I'd like to have a point of order here that we just state our case rather than
Okay,
debate
so
back
I
and
just, I
forth,
wasn't,
because
I'm
no,
just
hang on,
trying to
don't
decide-
interrupt, please. I have the floor.
You're up next.
This
Hold on,
is
Julian.
about-
Julian, you don't have the floor, Julian. Julian, Hillary has the floor. All right. I'll come back to you after this, but Hillary.
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand where the 3% came up with. And if we looked at the last 10 years, Tom, I was just wondering, would that have forced a special election every year of the last 10 years? That was my only question about it. Okay. Thank you.
He has the floor right now. Thanks, Hillary.
Based on what James has said and what Hillary has said, I don't really have anything new to add.
Rianne. Okay, thank you. Sam. Go ahead. Sorry if I keep cutting out.
No, that's okay. So I think that Hillary and James kind of summed up a lot of my thoughts on this, but just a couple extra things. I think Hillary touched on this a little bit, but it is impossible to talk about our city budget without even mentioning the state. It's a very important part of our revenues is revenue sharing. So I understand that they're only obligated a certain amount, but it's impossible to not have that conversation. So I think that's an important point that needs to be heard. I would also mention that at least with the school budget and I would assume the city budget as well, a major part of these budgets is going to be salaries and benefits. And those are things that the city is contractually required to spend money on for specific reasons, obviously. And so if they don't have the revenues coming in to cover that, and they do need to, it is going to be over 3% or whatever, they're going to have to cut from places like Public Works or ask for more school budget cuts, etc. And, I hear people complain just as much about their property taxes go up as they do about there being potholes in the road because the city isn't repairing the roads fast enough. Or the roads aren't being plowed fast enough or whatever it may be. So I think that those are important things to keep in mind as well. I mean, we just did huge repairs on the library, the roof of the library, after years and years and years of the library taking budget cuts and allowing to operate kind of at the bare minimum, and now needed major repairs. So it's much easier to do these things in smaller increments, in my opinion. My only question as well is this 3% increase only for the city's part of the budget, or is it the overall budget? Like, would it also include the school budget? Because that brings in a whole nother state funding issue. So I'm just not sure if we're talking about only the city's portion of the budget going up 3%, or if we're talking the overall budget. Because the way that I would see it happening is if the budget fails, then it's going to have to go back and cuts are going to have to be made, and then they're going to have to revisit it. And that's probably, I'm assuming, on the school side and the city side if it's both budgets. So.
Thank you, Sam. Hey, Tom, do you just want to clarify on Sam's question? All right, thank you, Sam. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. You might not have heard me maybe, but Tom, do you want to just quickly clarify on Sam's question?
Well, Sam, the city's taxes aren't based on the municipal budget alone, so of course it would include the school budget.
Okay, well, I mean, it is kind of a valid question because they are two separate budgets that come together at the end, you know? The school.
But I mean, the city's budget is both. There's a municipal budget and there's a school budget, and that makes up the city's budget.
Okay,
That's
so
what-
maybe I
that's what
misspoke.
taxes are paid
I'm
on.
asking then if it would be based off of the 3% on only the municipal budget or the entire city budget of school.
On the entire city budget.
Okay, thank you. That was the clarification that I needed. My other question is, I'm wondering if anybody has spoken to like the finance committee that works on putting this budget together, or Mike or any of the counselors about their feelings on this, because I think the people that actually are creating the budget, it might be able to provide some insight to this.
Thank you, Sam. Ludi.
I don't have a whole lot of new things to add. I really liked everything Sam just had to say, and I agreed with a lot of what you, James, and Hillary had said. But our subcommittee did reach out to the counselors and a common sentiment, and we sent out a report, but this is from when we did it in January. And I'd heard also from other people who reached out to me time and time again that they didn't think that it was a good idea. And as James said, the council is elected by their wards to do this job, and they work really hard on it. So yeah, I don't have anything really new to add. So.
All right, thank you, Ludi. Phil.
Yeah, so I remember first when I first heard about 3% threshold being added to the charter. I wasn't really excited about such a proposal, but the way the amendment is drafted now with the 3% and then only going to the voters if it's over 3%, I think it's a great idea. Actually, being somebody who voted on the budget and prepared the budget, I understand the intricacy of how the budget is put together, right? And I can assure you that bringing back a budget to a council will not stop them from finding a way to make it better, because that happens plenty of time during the process, right? When you're a council, either you get presented numbers. If you guys don't agree on the numbers, it goes back to the city manager. He makes the appropriate cuts, and then he comes back, and it's just there's that back and forth that happens between the council and the city manager. And one thing I found out when I was in city council is that yes, the city council is elected to represent the voters, but more often than not, when it comes down to crunch time, I don't think that the voice of the people is actually represented. And I think that giving the people a chance to be able to go ahead and have a voice is important. And having a threshold, it doesn't mean that we're going to tie the hands of the city council. It actually puts accountability to the people who live in the city to decide how they want to go ahead and have the city run. Relying on the state is something that I don't believe we want to do, because historically it has been proven that the state is not that reliable when it comes to holding the end of the bargain. It shifts depending on who holds the seat in Augusta. And I think that we have to do our due diligence here in Waterville before we start relying on somebody else's, right? And as far as the school budget, we don't have a say into what gets cut, right? So I heard somebody mention that, if we decide 3%, what decides what get cut? When we decide cuts on a school budget, we don't have a say on what gets cut. We give them a number, they cut it, or if we don't give them a number and we just pass their budget, right? And as for the time that I've been involved in the city budget, I can assure you that there's always a way to make numbers work. I've been on meetings where the previous meetings before final vote, their claims were made that there was no way to fix an item. And when that item gets rejected, the fix happens. Sometimes city council need a little encouragement. And I think that having the people, who live here, who pay the taxes, be the ones who decide if they are happy with the budget or not, I think is important. And that way it creates, kind of that link between the city council and the people, where a small majority of the folks cannot get to decide completely as far as what our budget will look like, and we can have everybody involved in the process.
Thank you, Phil. Julian, was there something you wanted to add?
No, I just the way the meeting was going, that, we're meant to have, in order to speed up the process, back and forth debates with members might make the evening go a long time. So I was trying to call a point of order. But are you asking for a round of second comments now, or what are you asking me? I lost.
So
I lost. I didn't hear a word you said. Jim.
Sorry, I know I keep cutting out. So definitely. Okay, well, thank you for telling me that. If I'm cutting out, definitely anybody speak up, because I know that my connection is not the greatest. And I honestly can't remember what I just said. But you asked if we were going to a second round of discussion, and no.
Okay.
I was just getting back to you because I told you I'd get back to you.
Yeah, thank you for getting back to me.
All right, thank you. All right, so thank you everybody for the discussion. So we'll move to a roll call vote, and this is on Tom's motion.
James, I can't hear you.
Yeah, can we ask Patty to do the roll call? Just while you guys are cutting in and out, both James and Tom keep cutting in and out. So I think it just might be easier if Patty does all the roll calls tonight.
Sounds good to me. Patty, do you mind doing that?
Not at all. Do you want me to start at the bottom?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing, reverse alphabetical order.
Okay. Kathy Weeks. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
No.
Hillary,
No.
Rian,
No.
Sam,
No.
Ludi,
No.
Phil.
Yes.
The vote is 5 in favor and 5 opposed.
All right, thank you, Patty. Hey, anybody that's tech savvy out there, do you think I would cut out less if I took it off Wi-Fi and put it on LTE?
Possibly. If your LTE signal's really strong, possibly.
All right, I'm going to try that, see if that makes a difference. Okay, so I guess that's to be determined. So it sounds like Mike Roy is not going to join us tonight, or at least he hasn't got back to you yet, Patty, correct?
Well, actually, yeah, he did get back to me. I didn't want to interrupt in the middle of that discussion, but basically he said that he had been busy preparing for tonight's special council meeting, and that he hadn't had time to break away to join the meeting. And I asked if he would prefer the discussion for his piece to be moved to the next meeting, and he said he would be fine with that. So I would leave that up to the commission, whether they wanted to postpone that discussion or not.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody have a motion to move that item to the next meeting?
So moved.
All right, I'll second that. Let's take a roll call vote. Sorry, Patty, you're up again.
Wait, hold on. Is this just the Mike Roy comments, or is this also the B1 on the agenda? Are we moving
Yeah.
both?
No,
Okay.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I should clarify that. Yeah, it would be to move both, because I know he wanted to comment on the city manager piece of things, as well as your motion, Rianne, your first motion about filling city council vacancies.
Okay, are we ready for a roll call vote?
Yes.
So this is to postpone those discussions until the next meeting. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
yes,
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
The vote is 10-0.
Sounds good. Thanks, Patty.
Mhm.
All right, so we'll move on to the agenda item. The next two motions on the agenda were conditional motions, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Rianne, but they were conditioned on if Tom's motion passed, then you were going to bring up these two motions, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to Roman numeral 5, which is a motion by Rianne regarding clarifying a council vacancy. So I'll turn it over to you, Rianne, to articulate your motion.
Okay, so this is what we did with the mayor. Essentially that if it just clarifies in the language that the council doesn't need a 2/3 vote essentially to vote if one of them is successfully recalled. And that instead the vacancy is going to take effect immediately on the canvassing of votes. And then I just went ahead and did it for the school board as well. If I'd been a little more on top of it, I would have suggested it when we did it with the mayor, so we could have just done all three all at once. But that's all that is just doing exactly what we did for the mayor for the council and the school board.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Ludi. All right, discussion. Kathy, any discussion?
No.
Julian, any discussion? Julian, any discussion?
Sorry, James. No discussion.
Thank you. Tom, any discussion?
No.
Ron, any discussion?
no,
James, no discussion. Hillary, any discussion?
No.
Rianne,
Yeah.
Sam,
No.
Ludi,
Nope.
Phil.
No.
All right, let's move to a roll call vote. So Patty, if you wouldn't mind taking over.
Kathy,
No.
Julian,
No.
Tom,
Excuse me? Did someone call my name? We call it a
Yeah.
roll call vote?
yes, this is the roll call vote for this item 5 on the agenda.
Yes.
Tom, Ron,
no,
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yeah.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
No.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-4. So the motion fails.
Okay. All right, on to the next motion, which is Roman numeral 6. Motion by Rianne. Go ahead and articulate your motion.
So this one and the next one, the one after, and then the special election one that we held. All this does is drop. Right now, the charter calls for a 5-vote threshold to do any of these changes. And this just simply drops it down to 2/3 members present, excluding vacancies. And this was brought to me by counselors who were concerned about the fact that we've had a dozen vacancies in, 9 years. And so that's, more than one a year. And they were concerned that we could get to a point at which we had only 5 counselors, and they didn't want to need unanimous approval in order to conduct the business of the city. So they requested that we change 5 down to 2/3, excluding vacancies. So it's essentially just the same thing because 5 is 2/3. So this just clarifies that it's 2/3 of active counselors. It's just a clerical thing, really.
And that's for calling a special meeting.
Yeah, it's for calling a special meeting, but the next few motions really kind of are variations on a theme.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All right, discussion. Kathy, you're up.
No, I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you. Julian, you're up.
I'm sorry, I think it's safe for me to actually leave my mic on. No, nothing to add, no.
All right, thank you. Tom, anything to add?
No.
Thank you. Ron.
No discussion.
Thank you. James, no discussion. Hillary.
No discussion?
Rian, anything to add?
Yeah.
Sam, any discussion?
Nope.
All right. Ludi, any discussion?
Nope.
Phil, any discussion?
No.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, Patty, if you don't mind again.
Yes. Kathy,
No,
Julian,
No,
Tom,
No.
Ron,
No.
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yeah.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor and 4 opposed. The motion fails.
Okay. All right, so moving on to our next motion, and you sort of already explained it, Rian, but go ahead and formally articulate the motion.
Yeah, this is one that actually came to me from the planning board, and they requested that this be put in because right now the process with the planning board and how things go to the planning board get litigated, essentially decided at the planning board. The planning board takes 2 votes and then it goes back to council, and council can just do whatever they want by a simple majority vote. This would, just for the quasi judicial boards that we already named in a previous amendment, this would give them a little more autonomy to make binding decisions, in that the recommendations that they send to council can only be overridden by a 2/3 vote. And I talked to, this came to me from the planning board. I talked to, Bruce White. He's on board with it. Sam indicated she was in support of it. Tom was open to the idea. Tom, I think you wanted to have a little more discussion on it. And so I'm interested in your thoughts, particularly on this motion.
Thank you, Rian. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
All right, discussion. Kathy.
no comment.
Thank you, Julian.
no comment.
Tom.
Rian, I think to your point and to the point that you heard from Bruce and from Samantha's, I mean, if we don't have this type of language, then we might as well just save ourselves money, disband all of these boards, and have the city council make every single decision. So
That's how I read it too. That's how I read it as well.
I support it.
All right, thanks, Tom. Ron.
No discussion on this.
Thank you. James, no discussion. I'm in favor of it. Hillary.
Okay, so we've got 3 people on the planning board here. So Rian or anyone on the planning board, I just wanted to ask, so there would be like 2 votes, for example, on the planning board, and it goes to city council. And the concern is that a simple majority is all it takes. Is that what you're saying, Rian?
So the way that it works right now is what Tom was really hinting at, in that since the city council can essentially look at the recommendations from these boards and then say, all right, whatever, and just hold their own vote on whatever they want. They can vote to agree with the, planning board. They can vote to not agree with the planning board. They can just vote to table something. They can just, I think Tom really nailed it when he said, if we don't do this, we might as well just eliminate these boards and have the council do everything. Because if you're not going to give them the autonomy for what you created them for, then there's no point to them.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Rian, do you have anything further to say?
No, I don't.
All right. Sam, discussion.
No, I don't. I think Tom and Rian summed it up pretty well.
Thank you. Ludi.
I'll echo that. I have nothing to add.
Thank you. Phil, anything to add?
No,
All right. Roll call. Patty, you're up.
Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
yes.
Vote is 10 in favor and 0 opposed.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
Mhm.
All right, moving on to the next motion. This is Roman numeral number 8. Go ahead and formally articulate your motion, Rhiannon.
Okay, so again with the variations on a theme here with the 2/3, but this one's slightly different, just because right now the appointment of the city manager and the city solicitor can be by a 4 vote or just a simple majority. And since these are such high impact positions in the city, I would like to raise that threshold to 2/3 instead of just having a simple majority. And again, you'll note I did 2/3 of members present and voting to get around vacancies. I didn't want to set this at a 5 vote.
All right, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Discussion, Kathy.
Could I just ask Rian to clarify that one more time, please?
Sure, yeah, go
Yes.
ahead, Rhiannon.
Okay, so right now, we're talking in a couple months. I'm going to use a couple months as an example here. The city council will be appointing a new city manager, and right now they can do that just by a simple majority. And I think given the nature of these positions and just how impactful they are to the city, that we should require that the city council have as much of a consensus as possible in hiring these individuals. So instead of a majority, I'd like to raise it to a 2/3 majority to actually appoint the city manager or appoint the city solicitor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Does that answer your question, Kathy?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion to add?
No discussion.
Okay, thank you. Julian.
Yes. Hang on here. I think it's an interesting proposal. I'm wondering if there's any thought that Rian might amend it, or any thoughts that possibly, like Rian said, the decision is so big that a mayor at the time might also have a vote, so that it was actually 8 people voting on it rather than just 7.
I will say to do that, we would have to go back and amend the mayor's position to give them those powers. And secondly, that creates a 4-4 tie.
Yes, it does. So do you think there's any merit to that suggestion? Any less, or?
I am not in favor of amending the powers of the mayor.
Okay. No, I think the suggestion is reasonable that Rian proposed, because like Rian said, it's an important position and you could have just 5 councillors show up. So yeah, I'm game.
All right, thanks, Julian. Tom, any discussion?
Rian, they are both very important positions. And just like the obligations of the Charter Commission, I think are very serious, and we are holding ourselves to a higher vote. You know, we're trying to get as close to a consensus we are before we add anything to the Charter Commission, to the charter revisions that would go out in the fall. I think that this makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Ron.
Yes, I think this is a good point that Rian has brought up. These 2 positions, the mayor and the city solicitor, these are very, very important. And the more closer we can get to a majority, I think the better off we'll be. So I certainly agree with this one that Rian has tonight.
Thanks, Ron. I'm next. I would just echo what everybody else has already said. I'd be in favor of it. Hillary, any discussion?
Yeah, I agree. And Tom, you took the words right out of my mouth. The example that we have of a 7-3, just showing a little bit more consensus is a good thing. So I like it.
Thank you. Anything to add, Rianne?
Oh, no, I'm good.
All right. Sam, anything to add?
No, thank you.
Thanks. Ludi, anything to add?
Nah, I'm in favor of it.
All right. And Phil, anything to add?
Oh,
All right. All right. Let's move to a roll call vote. Thank you, Patty, in advance.
Yes. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
yes.
The vote is 10 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you very much, Patty. All right, moving on to the next item, which would be Roman numeral 9, motion by Rianne. Go ahead and formally articulate your motion, man.
Well, I think this one's going to go the exact way as the vote to motion 6 went, because it's exactly the same thing. So I will just go ahead and save us the trouble of the vote and discussion and withdraw it.
Okay, withdrawn. All right, so moving on to item number or motion number Roman numeral 10. Go ahead, Rianne.
Okay, so this one is where Patty had suggested that we list all of the items not subject to a mayoral veto. It looks like here it says list items subject to. That should be list items not subject to the mayoral veto and have them consolidated in one spot. And at the time that we were discussing it, I had said that I was going to hold making a motion on that until we got to hear City Council. If you read that section, I think it fits a lot better to just insert it in there and list the 5 things that the mayor can't veto.
All right, and then just I've got one quick question. So I know what you're saying. If you read through the charter, there's various spots where it mentions that the mayor can veto something or can't veto something. So would everything in the charter about the mayor being able to veto or not veto something, would that remain the same? And then in addition to that, we would add this new paragraph or whatever under Article 4, which just basically lists everything that's not subject to a veto.
Yeah, I was just going to leave it where it was. I think there's a couple of instances where it makes sense where it is. Like if you look at the appointment of the city manager in the city manager section, it does even, call out and say this can't be overridden by the mayor. The zoning appeals one, there's a couple of instances where they are in the section that they are makes sense. But Patty was the one who had suggested that we list them all in one place. And this is the best place to have them all in one place.
All right, thank you. I'll second this motion, and so we can move on to discussion. Kathy, any discussion?
No discussion.
Thank you. Any Julian, any discussion?
Nope.
Thank you. Tom, any discussion?
No.
Ron?
No discussion on this.
All right, I'm with you on that. No discussion. Hillary?
No discussion.
Rianne, no discussion?
Yeah, I'm good. No discussion.
All right. Sam?
No discussion.
Ludi?
No discussion.
All right. Phil?
No,
Okay, let's move to a roll call vote. Patty?
Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
yes.
Vote is 10 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right. Thank you, Patty.
James.
Yes, go
James.
ahead, Ron. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yes, before we go on to the next one, can I ask Patty a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Patty, normally when we have these charter commissions, the last one I believe was 7 years ago, is that correct?
Yeah. Ish.
Do we normally have as many changes in these?
Yeah, this is pretty standard. It's really a lot of cleanup that takes place. And And generally the bigger topics have been discussed in the past, like, keeping the mayor, keeping the wards, that sort of thing. So this is pretty much on track with what you would expect. Yes.
Okay, so we have this, and then we get back to our major points that we heard at our public hearing, the 7 things. I think we've done 2 so far. One, we did decide we're going to save the wards, and others we are getting to. So this is normal procedure when we have these charter meetings, I would assume.
I think it's normal. We have, several topics left to discuss, and I kind of, I'll let the chairs talk about the timeline a little bit, because we want to make sure that we meet the deadline of getting this to the voters in November. So, that can be discussed at the end of the meeting if they talk about the schedule of remaining meetings, which is on the agenda with item number 4.
Okay, so correct. All of this has to be taken care of for our vote, which we have in November. Is that correct?
Right. You have to have a final, if you want it to go to the voters in November, you have to get your work completed and a final report to the council in August, so that they can, Bill has time to review it, then it goes to the council for them to send it to the voters. If you can't meet that timeline, then you're looking at a future election, which you want to make sure that you can reach the threshold of 30% turnout. So that's a little tricky in the even the odd numbered years, it's harder to get a 30% turnout. So initially, that's why this group decided to go for this November. So the group can actually extend to 18 months if it can't get the work done for November. So, I mean, we've set a deadline, with this group, but there is an allowance in state statute to have it extend beyond that time if needed.
Okay, thank you for your input on that, Patty.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Patty. All right. So let's move on to the next motion. This would be Roman numeral 11. Rianne, go ahead and articulate your motion.
Wait, I'm lost. No, I'm not lost. Okay, hold on. Sorry. I clicked out to take some notes and now. Okay, so this motion, if we look at, if you have your paper copy in front of you and you look at page 13, this is Article 9. It's close to the end. I'm talking about that. We're going to call it a paragraph, but it's really that one sentence that's second from the end. Ordinance, orders, and resolutions not subject to mayoral veto shall take effect upon approval by the city council. I would just like to clarify here that that's except for ordinances which follow the process as defined in section 11.
Okay. All right. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you. So we'll move to discussion. Kathy, any discussion or questions?
No discussion.
All right. Julian, discussion or questions?
Nope.
Tom?
No.
Ron?
No.
Me, no. Hillary?
Nope.
Rianne, anything else?
No.
Sam?
Yes.
All right. Ludi
Nope.
and Phil.
No.
All right. Let's move to a roll call vote. Patty?
Yes. Kathy?
Yes.
Julian?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Hillary?
Yes.
Rian?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
Ludi?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is 10 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you, Patty. Moving on to Roman numeral 12. Go ahead and articulate your motion, Rianne.
Okay, so we've already amended the section a little bit in that we decided that the ordinances will no longer be published in a newspaper. But my clarification comes with the full text of the ordinance shall be made available electronically within 10 days. I would just like to amend that to say to be made available on a city-controlled website.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion, Kathy.
No discussion.
All right, Julian,
No, seems reasonable.
Tom,
No, thank you.
Ron,
Sounds okay.
no discussion myself. Hillary,
Nope.
Rianne,
Good.
Sam,
Nothing to add.
Ludi,
Nope.
and Phil.
No discussions.
All right, roll call vote. Patty, please. Sorry, I might have cut out. Roll call votes. Patty, please.
Kathy,
Yes.
Julian? Julian, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
The vote is 10 in favor and 0 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so those were all of the motions that were sent to me ahead of time that had to do with Article 4, City Council. Does anybody have any verbal motions for any revisions to Article 4 that they'd like to make?
Yes.
All right, Phil, and I'll ask again after Phil's. Phil, go ahead and articulate your motion.
I would like to motion that the city budget be adopted by a 2/3 vote instead of simple majority.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll
Yes.
second that.
Okay, moving to discussion. Kathy.
Phil, could you expound on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, because right now the city budget can pass with a 4-3 vote, right? And since we voted to go to with a 2/3 with the election, with the appointment of a city manager, because we believe they're big items. The city budget is a huge item, right? So I'm assuming we would want more than a simple majority to be able to adopt the city budget. That would also show consensus among the council, and then will eliminate the need of a recall from the mayor or a veto, because you need a 2/3 vote to override a veto. So if you already have 2/3 of the council agreeing on the budget, that makes things a lot easier for everybody, consensus, and it streamlines the process. And it shows the voters that the majority, more than just a simple majority of the council, is okay with the spending that is about to take place for the constituents.
That's
All right.
perfect, Joe. Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Julian.
Yeah, it's a really good compromise between not letting the taxpayers vote on their own money and really having more of a majority from the council. Unfortunately, I think it might bite the biscuit the way the last one did with a unison voting block, but I'd like to praise Phil for his great idea there. And I think that the taxpayers need some say. And, when you speak of people being elected and voting them out, when you look at Ward 3, which has 1,000 students that vote on who to elect for that ward, it was mentioned before that you can vote them out, but those 1,000 people in that ward who elect them in don't pay property taxes. Renters pay property taxes, they pay no taxes. And therefore, one of the councillors out of 7 at least isn't really accountable for how high taxes are, because if you're not paying taxes, that's not a factor for you. So I think removing one of the 7 and having it more of a majority would be greater fairness to the taxpayers of Waterville. And, when we talk about costs, we can talk that it's only labor or only healthcare, But when I see pools for 4 million and river walks for 1 million and, you know, double packer trucks that break down, I don't necessarily believe that it is just labor and healthcare. And I haven't seen a fiscal council, and I also haven't seen them listen when residents do speak at meetings regards budgets. And that's why there's been 2 budget repeals. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, James. You know, picking a city solicitor is a very, very, very important job. Picking a city manager is a very, very important job. And amending the charter, if it's going to happen, is a very serious thing. There is nothing more impactful that the city council does than set a budget every year. And if we're going to say that those other things require a higher threshold and something that is closer to unanimity, then voting on a budget should as well.
Thanks, Tom. Ron, you're up.
Oh, I certainly cannot disagree with Phil here. The more people we have, 2/3, I certainly agree with Phil. I usually do, and I certainly do here.
Thank you, Ron. I'm up. I'm not in favor of the motion. I would just like to point out, though, that the city charter, the work we're doing, affects all residents of Waterville. It doesn't matter if you are registered to vote. It doesn't matter if you pay taxes. It's not just taxpayers that this charter affects. It's not just taxpayers that the city budget affects either. It affects all community members. Hillary.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point. You don't have to be a taxpayer to be a voter. So any voter obviously gets a say, not just people who are paying taxes. Phil, you said, so we don't have it in writing in front of us. Would it be 2/3 majority excluding vacancies?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'd love to hear anybody else chime in, but I think this makes sense to me.
All right, thank you. Rianne.
I'm a toss up on this. I don't think anybody's made a super compelling point that's going to get me to a yes on this, especially considering that we have had unanimous budgets that have passed through the council that have then turned around and not been upheld by a mayoral veto, or not budgets, just council votes, unanimous council votes that have flipped upon a mayoral veto. And so, you know, Phil, you had mentioned that, oh, this would eliminate the need for the mayoral veto. And I guess I would ask that if we do pass this and it does pass, then we might as well go in and alter Article 2 there to say that the mayor can't veto the budget if it already needs a 2/3 vote. You know, but I don't think we really want to do that. I don't know that I'm also in favor of going in and, you know, changing sections that are almost 100%, you know, that are pretty much 90% we voted out already. And so to that end, we still have the veto, and we have the veto twice. We have the mayoral veto, which has consistently forced councilors to come back to the table and find more consensus. And then we also have the plebiscite veto, you know, as Julian was getting at, and that there were 2, you know, budget recall attempts. But I think James makes the most compelling point here, that this is really, you know, about social services, and it's not just about taxpayers, but also that we have several mechanisms in place if there are enough people in the city who are unhappy about the veto or about the budget vote.
Thank you. Sam.
I mean, I think Rian makes good points. I'm kind of a toss up on this too. I think having the 2/3 forces a little bit of consensus, and I don't ever think that that's a bad thing. I think it forces counselors to really work together. So I think I could be swayed for this one.
All right, Ludi.
I'm also a toss-up. I understand, like, given that we're doing the 7-3 on charter, I understand the sentiment of having a 2/3 on city council. So yeah, I understand. I could be swayed too.
And Phil, it was your motion. Do you have anything to add?
Not really, but I just want to point out that relying on the veto power of the mayor to get councilors to have more discussion, I think is just inviting more issues, because we know how that goes when the mayor vetoes something, and all the publicity that is welcome or unwelcomed. I think that making it so that the council among themselves can have a discussion before it gets to a point where things go sideways and people arguing, I think for me, would be something that we would want to do. All right. As far as the budget affecting everybody in the community, yes, it does affect everybody in the communities. That actually that point that James made reinforces the fact that we want to have the majority of the councilors who represent the majority of the people of the city agree on an item, instead of saying, well, we're okay with just some of the 4 of the councilors agreeing, instead of saying we want 5 of the councilors that therefore represent the majority, more people than 4 councilors, right? So the more councilors we have agreeing on this item, the better it is, because we are actually representing the voice of more people in the community. I think that reinforces the need for us to make sure that those councilors, agree on this item. So that's all I have to add.
Thank you, Phil. All right, let's move to a roll call vote. Patty, please.
James, before we take the vote, could I just ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So is the motion to make it 2/3 vote of the members present at the meeting? So if someone is absent from the meeting, you would still have that 2/3 threshold of the members present at the meeting?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So are we ready for me to call the roll?
Yes.
Oh, Hillary raised her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, let me just check raising hands. All right, go ahead, Hillary.
I'm sorry. James, could you repeat what you had said, why you had concerns about this?
Well, I mean, my concern was more just sort of the fact that people are talking more about it, how it affects taxpayers, and my point was that everything we're doing in the charter, everything that the city council does, particularly with the budget, it affects community members, whether or not those community members vote, whether or not those community members own property and pay taxes, and so I just was kind of wanted to make that point to this to Phil's motion specifically.
Yeah.
I don't agree with it. I think that, the way that Rhiannon articulated it was that there are other methods for people who are concerned about the budget to, basically repeal it or at least have their voice heard, are sufficient in my mind. So that's really all I was saying.
Okay.
Anybody else want to raise their hand?
I guess my only concern about it is stripping the mayoral veto from the process.
It does not strip the mayoral veto. Just to be clear, the mayor can still veto it, right? But I think that the veto would kind of be pointless, right? Because it will that 2/3 majority can override his veto. So that means that the more people who already agree with it removes the need, removes the basically that need to have to go back and revisit, because we already have the majority of the people who represent the majority of the people of the city agree on the budget. It makes things a lot easier for constituents, for the city council, even for the mayor. The mayor can still veto it, but again, we already know that if you already have the majority agreeing, the process will be a lot smoother and a lot faster.
All right, Kathy's got her hand up.
Right, so I guess I'm just trailing off of what Samantha just said. So Phil, are you saying that if we vote this 2/3 in, a mayor veto would mean nothing?
No, the mayor veto will still give pause. I mean, it's an additional step there that's still there. And if the mayor still feels like, even though the 2/3 of the councilors, agreed with the budget, there still needs for it to be revised. I mean, he can still exercise his right and veto the budget too, so that they can go back and take another look at it based on whichever information that he feels would be appropriate for them to review.
All right, thanks, Phil. I'm just gonna I'll invite another round of discussion just to make sure everybody gets to their chance to say all their piece. So, Kathy, do you have anything more to add?
Well, I am just concerned about, now that I'm thinking about it, the 2/3, depending on the type of council we have. We could have a council that would vote to send money to Cuba. And it sounds like the mayor recall, the veto would do nothing for us.
All right, thank you. Julian, anything to add?
Yeah, it's still better than the way it is now, because you could have 3-4, and at least this way it's 2/3. And I think if you have 2/3, it's not that unreasonable. It's the biggest thing the whole city does is the budget. You should have a 2/3 majority, okay? It's huge. It's taxpayers. Businesses depend on the council to get this right. And if you can't get 2/3, you probably shouldn't be passing it. I mean, and you're much less likely to have a budget repeal against 2/3 than 3-4. The council is more unanimous, and I think it would invite compromise and discussion and debate amongst the council about how the city stands and future goals, if they have to be more compromising. And I think, boards always like to see a unanimous vote, dissension is good, but certain things, appointing a chair, some things are just good when they're more unanimous. And I think the budget would be one of them. So I commend Phil's motion and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom, anything to add?
He's on mute.
He's a mute.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
My only point in that regard is that I'm confident that people will be more discerning if a higher threshold is required.
Thanks, Tom. Ron.
Yes, I would hope upping it to 2/3, we would have at least 2/3 people that was honest. And I certainly would go with what Phil says to you.
Thank you. Next. I don't have anything to add other than what I said previously. Hillary.
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of separate the two things. And James, that's why I'd asked that question of clarification, because I think your points were well made, but they weren't really speaking to the motion. So the idea of having 2/3 is kind of what we did discuss about having 7-3 with the Charter Commission. When we were talking about how when this goes to a vote in November, we have a better chance of a thumbs up versus a thumbs down if we find consensus here. If what we're talking about is residents and voters being concerned about the budgets, and I agree with Tom, it's perhaps one of the single most important things that the city council has to do. Then finding consensus, although it may not be easy, it's part of the deal. I think I'd rather have the city councilors argue with each other than have neighbors arguing with each other. So I understand that there's some people who feel strongly against this, but I think it's part of the job. And I think asking city councilors to work together to find more consensus is a good thing.
Thank you, Hillary. Rianne.
Yeah, I'm still hung up on this.
mostly because if the mayor vetoes a 3-4 vote, it's going to force a compromise. In fact, I think every time the mayor has vetoed, it's forced a lot more compromise. And I think that leaves room for the minority to have more of a voice in the budget. And that sounds a little kind of contradictory with the 2/3. But if there's a 2/3 vote and you have two people who are in the minority, they have, once that budget is passed that first time, they have nothing. They have no recourse. Doesn't matter if the mayor vetoes it because they already know they've got the 2/3 vote to sit there and override it. But if we leave this at a simple majority and it does happen to be vetoed by the mayor, you're looking at suddenly getting a unanimous vote on the budget or a 6-1 vote. And to that end, why would we do, a 2/3 majority? Why not just make it a unanimous vote? But I guess I have a question for Phil, and that's, Phil, if this passes, and I think I'm counting the votes and it will, are you then in favor of adding the budget to the list of items that the mayor cannot veto? Since there's essentially no point to it with a 2/3 majority.
Well, there's no point, right? Again, the mayor can veto because it's always good to have to have a different set of eyes and a different set of point of view. Right? We don't want to eliminate, that from the mayor, because the mayor could have a valid point that the councilors did not catch when they were having the 2/3 majority. So that still leaves the mayor the ability to be able to veto it and tell the people why. And therefore, if this point is valid, it puts another stop, and it's a small additional stop to just pause and reflect and say, hey, we had a 2/3 majority, but let's just review this item. And if we find out that that particular point is not a valid point that is made by the mayor, then therefore the 2/3 majority can just go ahead and move forward with the budget. It's a good thing. I don't understand how we can say we want a 2/3 majority to appoint the city manager, but we don't want a 2/3 majority to pass one of the single largest item in the city of Waterville, right? That will affect everybody in the community. For me, if you ask, having more people agree on an item is better than having few people agree on an item. I think it makes perfect sense if we want to keep things in a way that promotes more communication between councilors and shows the taxpayers that, hey, the people that we have elected, the most of them agree on this item that is usually pretty contentious, right? And we decided to have a 7-3 threshold for city charter, right? But we don't want to have a higher majority at the council for the city budget itself.
So I just want to be clear that my hang up is really on this mayoral veto thing. We talk about raising the threshold for the city manager and for the city solicitor. And the reason that I did that is that's not subject to a mayoral veto. Everything else, I think that passes in these ways is subject to mayoral vetoes. And I'd have to actually go through, and I'm leafing through it right now and not doing it quickly enough, but I believe that everything that is not subject to a mayoral veto has that 2/3 threshold, and there's very little else that does, which is why I bring up the point of what is the point of giving the mayor power if it does essentially nothing here. It's not necessarily, this is again is where I'm on the fence. I'm not necessarily opposed to raising this threshold to 2/3. It's just kind of, how does the mayoral veto fit into this? And I would only support this if I knew that there was then support to add the budget to the list of exclusions to the mayoral veto. I think most of the time the city council here has passed the budget past July 1st. if they pass it past July, just because that's when information comes in, if they pass it past July 1st with a 2/3 majority, it can then go into and take effect after, the certain number of days that it needs to. I think it's an emergency measure, actually, or however they do it. But when you throw the mayoral veto into there, all of a sudden you're pushing the budget back, which has already been set back from the July 1st, even more. So that's where I am on this is if people will support adding the budget to the list of things the mayor cannot veto, like everything else, and just standardizing everything to here are the things that require a 2/3 motion. These are all the things that aren't subject to a mayoral veto. Then I will vote for this.
Yeah, and then I just want to make a point, we don't want to remove checks and balances, right? I will never be in favor to remove those checks and balances. We want to still have the mayor to have, the opportunity to be able to give pause for people to, to check and take a second look. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt anything at all, I don't think. And like you mentioned yourself, maybe that pause gets us to a 6-1 vote. You never know. Maybe it brings it back to a 4-3. But if it does, at least we know that initially we have the support of the majority of the council on the initial vote. I wouldn't want the mayor's veto to be removed, because then we'll just pretty much give the entire authority to the city council to be able to vote. And like we mentioned before, if we have 7 Democrat councilors on the city council, then all of a sudden, they just vote on whatever they want, right? And nobody will really dare to be able to stop them and say, hey, we need to pause here and take a look at this and go back. And that's why I believe that the mayor veto should still be there. But at least we will have a higher consensus, initially, to be able to move this massive item forward. Again, we're talking about the city budget, right? We're not talking about electing a city official or picking it. We're talking about the entire city budget. And we are saying we are not comfortable moving forward, with the higher majority when it comes to this item.
All right, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Phil. Sam.
I don't think I have anything else to add. Thank you, Ryan, for clarifying that, because I was a little confused about the veto part, and that does make sense to me. That addition that you're saying. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Sam. Ludi.
I don't have anything new to add.
Okay, thanks. And then Phil, I know you've already got some time to speak. Anything new to add?
No.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Julian's got his hand up. What's up, Julian?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I'm not sure, again, I would ever vote for anything that removed the veto on it. I think that the motion should stand as it is. And wouldn't the motion have to be amended if that's what Ryan wants to add to it?
That's correct. Yeah, as it stands right now, Phil's motion, and Phil, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion is to require that the city budget be passed by 2/3 majority of the members present, the city council members present, excluding vacancies, and that's it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. No one else has got their hands up, so let's move to a roll call vote. So, Patty, I think we are finally ready.
Yes. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James,
No.
Hillary,
Yes.
Ryan,
No.
Samantha,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
The vote is, let's see, 8 in favor and 2 opposed.
And I'd just like to congratulate Phil for actually proposing a motion that passed.
All right. Yeah, no,
Thank
thanks.
you.
That was a thoughtful motion and thoughtful discussion. Thanks, everybody, for that. All right. So 7:44. Were there any other, not that I'm necessarily going to take them up right now, but were there any other verbal motions under Article 4 that any members were going to propose?
James, does Article 4 address adjournment of this meeting?
That takes precedent over anything. But
Okay.
before we
If
get to
anyone wants make
adjournment,
that
I wanted
motion, I will
to say,
especially in light, James, I hate to interrupt you, but especially in light of how much ground we covered today, I will say this. I know there were a lot of motions that didn't pass. I know there was a lot of spirited discussion, but I will say that just like last meeting's, the last meeting we had, I thought that today's meeting was terribly productive. And I just want to say thanks to everybody tonight.
all right, I will second that for sure. All right, so we'll move on then. I wanted to talk briefly about the schedule.
Oh, wait, could I don't have a motion for tonight, but I would like to request that next week, we discuss emergency powers. We had discussed sending things to Bill Lee, sections 1 and 2. But we're not done with section 2. We've had motions held for emergency powers, and Bill Lee had asked that we complete a section before sending it to him. And so I have motions in mind, happy to send the text out and everything for emergency powers, but I would really like us to discuss and have motions on emergency powers to the city next week, just so we can solidify sections 2 and then hopefully also tomorrow 3, or next week 3 and 4, and get them sent off to Bill Lee for review so we can get done sooner.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good, because we were going to come back to the city manager qualifications, and Mike Roy was going to participate, so we can certainly put that on the agenda for next time. And then Kathy and Hillary have questions. Kathy, I saw your hand up first, so go ahead. Kathy, do you have anything? You had your hand up, Kathy. Was it about this, or was that from prior?
I'm sorry, I thought I was off mute. I will have 2 motions under Article 4 to discuss next time. And Hillary, I think you're going to say the same thing that I am about to say, that Committee C was charged with developing the emergency chapter.
No, they weren't. They were charged with reporting out how other towns had theirs, which you guys reported out a couple weeks ago.
We didn't report out.
I thought
So I'm gonna correct you both. No, I'm gonna correct you both. So what we had been tasked with doing was looking at it. Kathy, I volunteered to consider, putting something together with you, but our committee was tasked with looking at it. We had a discussion with our committee, and I'm pretty sure I reported to the Charter Commission that our subcommittee had decided, because at the time when we discussed it, the pandemic was still pretty new. We wanted to give other towns a little bit of time to settle into things before we reached out to people in other towns who might have emergency provisions in place, so that we could actually get firsthand information for how's it working, what would they recommend. Again, we get to do what we want to do. We just decided as a committee to wait. So we actually haven't given a report yet, Rianne.
Hillary, that is correct. We had decided because of the crisis environment.
Yep.
All right. And then Hillary, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we hadn't done our job as a subcommittee yet, and I'm happy to get going on it. And James, you're on it. Kathy, you're on it. Samantha, you're on it, and we work really well together. So I'm sure that we can gather information if the commission would like us to do that for our next meeting. But again, Kathy, I would
ahead of next meeting.
Well, we have to. So it depends when our next meeting is. If it's in 2 weeks, absolutely happy to do that.
Yeah, so we'll get to when the next meeting is, and I'm happy to, with our subcommittee, to make a report to bring back to the commission on that particular issue. Julian, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just before we close, I think it's important to discuss the scheduling and take a few comments if you would facilitate that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So I think what we can do is have our subcommittee, Hillary, Kathy, Sam, and myself, make a report on the emergency powers. But what I was going to bring up next was scheduling the rest of our meetings. Obviously, we've already come up with a schedule. It's basically every other Tuesday. And I was going to propose that we meet next week, which would essentially just add one meeting. So we had this meeting, we'd have a meeting next week, and then we'd have a regularly scheduled meeting the last week of May. And then at that regularly scheduled meeting last week of May, we could decide to possibly add more meetings if we thought it was necessary. I would say on that point, though, if we do meet next week, perhaps our subcommittee meeting regarding the emergency powers could wait until the following week. It might not be enough time to get everything together next week. It's certainly depending on which day next week we potentially might meet.
James, is that a motion that we would need to have seconded? Because if so, I will second that motion.
Yeah, so I will move to schedule a meeting next week. And I guess then it would be a matter of deciding which day next week. Yes.
James, I'm sorry, I'm chair of that committee. I'll schedule the meeting and we'll figure out when we can meet, but I'm happy to report in 2 weeks.
No. This is for the
Yeah.
commission.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah,
trying to
but
schedule two different things. Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. What I was saying is if the commission meets next week,
Right, call
our
you back.
subcommittee might not be ready to make a presentation
Right.
next week. We would have to
Yeah,
kick it off
okay.
at the following meeting.
Charlotte, Sophie,
But yeah, I would move to meet next week. Tom has seconded that. So during discussion, let's hear people's thoughts, but also if you're in agreement with meeting next week, potential days that you could meet. I know that we have to avoid Tuesday because Patty has her commitment with City Council, so it wouldn't be able to be Tuesday. But let's hear what people think. Kathy. Kathy, you may still be on mute if you're trying to say something.
I'm sorry, I thought I had unmuted myself. Wednesday or Thursday would work.
Okay. And then Julian.
yeah, any day works for me. I know when the commission started and we had all these subcommittees, I joked that we would be doing this in June. And the reaction was, oh, no way, we're going to be wrapped up and done now. I really don't mind. It's quite interesting. If you guys like my company that much, we can keep going as long as you like. But the concern is the amount of work that people have put in. And, you know, Rian's brought a lot of very good changes and cleaning up the charter that if we don't get this to the voters this November, we could be looking at a failed charter next year with a 30% turnout, being as there's not many big ticket items on, which means an entire year of work would have gone. And I think between the 10 of us, you know, we came from many different backgrounds and different political stances, but on the whole, I think we've done quite well. And I also think being timely and showing that we can get stuff done is important. So that's up to you guys. I mean, I'm not going to England this summer, so I'm quite happy to sit here, but you guys can also figure that out. But I do think that we need to try and make sure we get this to the voters this session, because that we will definitely have more than 30% turnout with the presidential election. And I will leave that up to the chairs to handle, but I am free any day next week. Thank you.
All right, Tom, what about you?
Not Friday. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that. And then the other thing is, I think that if we keep covering 15, 16 motions a meeting like we have over the last two, that we're going to find ourselves in a place where we've covered a lot of ground by the end of this month. And we may be, if we're not all the way there, we're going to be very, very close to giving something to Bill. So I'm as optimistic about resolving this situation in a timely fashion as I've ever been.
All right, perfect. Ron.
Yes, with my job at Bangor Raceway stopped, I have a pretty free calendar any evenings, Monday through Friday. But are we going to be taking up council vacancies next week, or is that at a later date?
We did agree to table that till next meeting. So assuming we meet next week, that would be next week.
Okay, so the next meeting we have, we'll be taking up what we was going to take up first thing this evening.
Say that again.
The day that we select next week, looking at the agenda we had this evening, we'll be taking up the one on council vacancies, which we postponed because Mike had to be at another meeting tonight.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. I would say that I'm available any day next week except for Friday. Hillary.
So I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday available. I've got piano lessons on Monday and Thursday, and we can't possibly compete with piano lessons, guys. Sorry.
All right. Sounds good. Rianne.
Wednesday's the only day that works for me. I would also like to add that we add a meeting the first week of June as well. I think Tom's right. We keep up this clip of running through motions. We can be done, but I think we also have to remember that it's not just voting the motions after we hear back from Bill. If there are no major changes, we're going to have to decide how to break these out and send these to City Council. Obviously, if there are major changes, it'll just be one big one. But we have to get through the charter, and then we've got to leave time for Bill to review it and come back. So I'm just with the sentiment of we're so close. Let's just, in 4 weeks, let's just get it across the finish line.
I agree.
Yeah. I agree. Maybe we could schedule that meeting in June, next meeting, just to make things a little bit more clean, and figuring out which day works that week for everybody. Sam.
Wednesdays actually don't work for me. I can reschedule next week, but I wouldn't be able to do every Wednesday. So other than that, Thursday and Monday are both open for me.
Okay. Ludi.
I'm good any day next week. And I'm also in support of having 4 consecutive weekly meetings or whatnot. So yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Phil.
Probably next week, just Wednesday works for me.
You said Wednesday does work for you, Phil, next week?
Yeah, that's the only day.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So, so it sounds like Wednesday is the day that everybody can meet. I understand, Sam, that normally you're not going to be able to meet Wednesdays, but that next week you could move it. And it looks like I just wrote down what everybody had said. It looks like Wednesday is the day that everybody can make, except for you, Sam. But if you're willing to move your schedule that night, then we could go with Wednesday next week.
James?
Yes.
Two quick, a suggestion and a question. We had spoke about sending to Bill Lee articles of changes that we'd already approved so that he doesn't get bombarded with a whole lot of changes at once. I'll just leave it with the chairs to think about that. I'm not sure if that's being done, but
that was the comment that I had brought up where Bill Lee wants a complete section. And so that's why I'd asked for emergency powers to be addressed soon, because we need to figure out if we're adding any emergency powers to the mayor before I can send that section.
Okay. Yep. And secondly, you know, if it gets to the Rian's right, saying that by the time Bill Lee sends it back and there's more debate, and then we've got to hash through the 7-3, and if we're going to turn this to the voters. So we might want to consider what a lot of people do is a workshop, like a whole Saturday morning or one day that we can all get together, you know, bang it out for 2 hours, have a 20-minute break and come back. And that's just a thought. And you could accomplish in a day's workshop what would take weeks to accomplish. But again, that's up to the members and the chair. It's just a thought I was having. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I will amend my motion. I'm going to amend the motion that I made, and I'm going to make this a dual motion. So the motion is part A is that we meet next week on Wednesday, and part B of my motion is that we adjourn today.
Seconded.
Yeah.
All right, seconded. All right, I'll do the roll call. Kathy.
Yes.
With Julian.
Before I say yes, can we make sure that Patty and all the advertisement is ahead for the community, so we have everything posted and the minutes in on time, because we don't want to be amiss on that for the Wednesday's meeting. Other than that, gladly, yes. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Ron,
Yes, and good evening.
thank you. You too. James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yep.
Sam.
Yes.
All right, Ludi
Yes.
and Phil. All right, sounds good. Great meeting, guys. Thoughtful discussions, and we'll talk to everybody next Wednesday. Oh, and one more thing. One thing that does certainly help the meetings go by a little bit smoother is if you have a motion that you know you're going to introduce next week, send it to Tom, and we'll get it on the agenda. All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, James.